Welcome to the Capacity Builders Workshop for December 15th, 2021. My name's Ruth Schwendinger. I think I was talking with somebody yesterday and they said they weren't quite sure how to pronounce my last name. So it's Schwen like the bicycle company and Dinger like the bell on the bike. So Schwendinger, it's pretty easy. And you spell it just like it sounds. So hope that helps. But tonight I wanted to talk about capacity building and what that looks like in the context of our coalitions. So last week we talked a little bit about the different parts of capacity building are as far as community level capacity building, coalition and individual level capacity. And we talked about it in the context of an analogy of a water wheel, where our communities are the water, the river running past, and we are, as facilitators, as leaders in our coalitions or task forces, we are that water wheel. We come in contact with those in our communities, and we try to move and connect those individuals who are part of the mill wheel that grinds and turns and produces our outcomes. And so we don't have to produce all the outcomes. We don't have to come into contact with everybody, but we're an integral part in connecting our community members to the resources of our coalition. And our coalition is made up of those many different parts. And so I want to take a look at those parts a little bit more closely tonight. And we talked about how to recognize and build capacity at the community level last time with a community level readiness assessment. And so this time we're just going to talk about the coalition bits and pieces and how different people can fit into that, different roles. So I want to share my contact information here. My email is ruths@preventionnetwork.org, and the phone number is my desk number. You can also reach me at the cell phone, 541-727-1850. And I think we had a couple more people join us, so I want to say hi to Kelly and Jen. I'm kind of keeping track of attendance because the last couple of times I've had to think back and try to put together who's here because not everybody puts it in the chat box when I ask. Jen, would you do me a favor, please? Or whoever's logged in as Jen, and just put your email address in the chat box so I can send you the feedback survey when we're done, along with the materials we might discuss tonight. Please and thank you. So our learning objectives for today are to understand how board structure helps create sustainability and understand the role expectations and the importance of clear expectations for level and length of service. So how many people have been a part of a board? And if you want to be on camera for this, that would be great. If you don't, that's okay as well. You can use the thumbs up emoji or anything like that. How many of you have been a member of a board where it was driven by one person, a board or a group of individuals who are meeting together for one purpose? I know I have. It's challenging. And so one of the key takeaways I want you to take from tonight's discussion is we have to continue motivating people. We have to continue reminding people of their purpose. And when we're bringing people together for coalition work on substance use disorder, suicide prevention, mental health, whatever your key issues are that you're dealing with, there's two ways we can bring people to the table. One, we need to clearly have our issues identified. People are going to be involved and passionate when we're touching a sensitive subject. So we have to find that sensitive spot, and we have to connect with people on that issue, on that sensitive spot, whatever it is for them. So you can broadcast, hey, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about substance misuse, we're talking about underage drinking, we're talking about reducing overdose deaths. And that's a really sensitive spot for a lot of people. And for those people who it is a sensitive spot for, they will respond to your messaging. And so you can broadcast your message, broadcast your issues, and expect a handful of people to come and want to be involved because of the issues. But when we're trying to recruit from 12 different sectors in the community, when we're trying to follow best practice and get a broad spectrum of our community involved, we have to go about it in a different way. We've all learned that, okay, we need the decision makers, we need the policy makers, we need those people who can commit resources to be involved. How do we do that? We've sent the invitation and they send someone who has no authority just to report back what we say at our meetings. And sometimes they share information about their ongoing projects, but they're not integrally involved in our coalition work. So how do we change that? And I was talking with a brilliant man earlier today, my father, and he said, there's two ways you get people involved. You find that sensitive spot and you touch them, you connect with them in that sensitive spot. And I would let you know that I firmly believe that every single individual is affected by mental health, is affected by substance misuse. And so we need to work harder as coalition leaders to help people see that connection. And so it's time for you all to do a little bit of work tonight, because it really is a workshop and I shouldn't be the only one doing the work. So what is in your area the most difficult to connect sector? We're talking about schools or law enforcement or the legal system or parents or youth. What is it, Chris?
Ours is actually the hospital. We cannot make a connection with them for some reason.
What have you tried so far?
Meetings, inviting them to meetings. We've had different people who had relationships with individuals at the hospital connect and invite them. We've invited them to lunch. We've done what we can think of at this point. I'm sure there's other things, but that's what we've done so far.
So that personal outreach is really important. And giving them the information, whether they respond or not to those meeting invites, is a really good idea, and critical as far as a starting point to communicate. Penny, you have your hand up.
Yes, I apologize. I don't have my video on because I don't have a great connection. We've tried to include the schools, but because they're overwhelmed with COVID right now, they're saying that they don't have time to participate in our prevention network coalition or network. So it's hard to get them to participate in our meetings.
Okay. And Jen, you're just you threw out there 3 different things. You said law enforcement, churches, and schools. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I can. I'm having the same issues as Penny. If I turn my camera off, it makes my Zoom go haywire. So, so we struggle with a lot of resistance in our community. So law enforcement, we've tried for years to get them involved, and there's always a reason. We've been told, oh, they don't have time, they don't have enough deputies that can handle doing this right now. We've been told, oh, we don't deal with those things in our community. speaking of like Narcan. I know, that's the face I made. So then as far as churches, we are starting to get a couple of church members or pastors coming to meetings in the last probably 2 months. But prior to that, we tried a lot of different ways just to get them involved. They'll go on our mailing list, but they weren't showing up to meetings. And then with schools, we have a touch and go relationship with our school. We get a lot of support when we're putting in programming, not so much support when it comes to things like, being at the table or being an active part of the conversation.
Okay.
It's a lot of, with our schools, it's a lot of what can we do for them?
Right.
So,
Right. Okay. Well, that gives me a better idea of where we're starting from. Does anybody else want to elaborate a little bit on their hard to reach sector? And I'm going to ask us to focus on just those that we've already mentioned, because Penny, you said schools, and I imagine that's a similar case that you're dealing with there.
Ruth, I do want to mention too, getting youth involved. So we would like our coalition to be youth driven, but it's hard to get them to commit to meetings. We try to have meetings later in the day, but then there's sports and things like that. So youth is another for us.
Yeah, Ruth, all these sectors that were mentioned, we have here in Sanilac at least some level of involvement from them. However, just because of the way that our county is set up, I am hoping to be able to draw in more of the churches. We have only one pastor right now, and she is just absolutely wonderful as far as working with us when we're trying to do something in the community. If it's like letting us use her parking lot, coming and doing prayers, she follows along with our meeting minutes each month, but never comes to meetings. She just can't do that. And I've done several mailings in the past to every county church and not gotten, a real positive or, engaging response.
I kind of want to elaborate because I said hospitals because we were just talking about this at our last coalition meeting. But 3 years ago when I took over, basically what was happening is that everybody would meet, they would talk, and nothing was happening.
Yeah.
And so when I took over, I am very action driven, and people got really ticked off, and a lot of people quit. They just refused to come to the meetings because I was asking for accountability and like, we got to do something. We can't just sit here. We can't be a bunch of talking heads. We're not even achieving anything. We weren't even spending the money that we were getting from our funding source on an annual basis, because it like last minute they'd go, oh, let's just buy some boxes, or let's just give it to another group, and I'm like, what are we doing? So a lot of people have walked away. So I'm kind of, even though the hospital has been a big challenge over the years, I'm rebuilding completely. Right now, I've got a county commissioner and a couple organizations at the table. I'm actually trying to figure out how to get people to come back. So I guess I have a bigger challenge than just the hospital. I'm really building from ground level again. I'm starting fresh.
We have some county commissioner involvement. That's a pretty critical issue, critical piece.
Yeah, and he just stepped up to take over the meetings. Like he's leading the meetings and everything too. And he's very action driven. I mean, the last meeting he was like, we've got money to spend, and he's like, we need to start working on how we're going to spend this and do it the right way. And I'm like, finally. I could have just grabbed him and hugged him. But yeah, I mean, when I took over, they they basically labeled me the devil, and because I was asking them to actually do something. And I'm like, come on, guys, we got to make a difference here. So there we go.
I had a different response because I am also action oriented of there's things to be done, let's do it. Why are we doing the things we're doing if it's not having an impact or not having the impact we want it to be having? And so the response I got was, wow, it's great to sit in meetings, not just for the sake of sitting in meetings, but to get things done and see results. And I feel like I'm a part of something. And so I guess you've probably experienced some of this with your newly involved people. But when you find somebody who can match that passion and match that energy level and that vision really for systems change rather than check a box, spend the money, get it out the door, make sure our name's on there somewhere in some way. It's really unique, and those are the people you want at the table. So I do want to take a minute and shift gears just real quick to the second learning objective here. We need to have really clear expectations, and we need to communicate those very clearly to everyone else who's involved. So what I've heard a lot of in the last, I guess, 10 minutes is they won't come to meetings or they can't come to meetings. And so I want to challenge you to come up with different ways people can be involved without coming to meetings. Because when we're talking about having the same expectations for a relationship, that is the number one key to having it be an effectively positive relationship. Every conflict I've ever been a part of has been because of a difference in expectations going in. And that's something that can be cleared up with communication. So when you're talking to potential members and potential advocates, I want you to have different levels of involvement for them to be involved at, rather than come to the monthly or quarterly meetings or bi-weekly meetings if they're part of a work group. And then your job as a facilitator in this group is to have clear expectations for those individuals. When they come to you, whether it's because they're passionate about the topic or because they've been assigned from their agency to participate in this group, you need to have things for them to do, ways for them to become involved. So whether it's making phone calls to pharmacies to check and see if they have an effective drug disposal system, or checking in with your law enforcement to see, I understand you don't deal with Narcan distribution, but we have access to some. Would you like us to bring that to you? Making those connections, inviting them to find some way that they're comfortable addressing the needs in your community, because the needs are there in all of our communities for substance misuse prevention, mental health supports. And it cannot be something that we just throw back on the professionals and say, we need more mental health supports. Gee, I wish someone would legislate that, because that's not an effective solution. We need everyone in our communities to be involved at some level. And as we continue to grow, we continue to invite people to participate in different ways, we will continue to raise awareness at the community level, because everybody that's a part of your group is also a member in the community, and they have an investment that they can make there. So our responsibilities are to have clear roles laid out, clear opportunities for people to get involved. And one of those that's really important is having a clearly defined length of service. So if somebody's going to be involved and they say, yeah, I can help with that for a little bit, I'll give it a try. Sometimes it makes sense to do that for a couple of months. And sometimes it makes sense to do that for a couple of years, depending on what they're willing to give. So I'm going to take a look. What are some of those different ways, those different levels that people can be involved in your group, in your task force, in your coalition? What are the different
Well-
roles?
Oh. I got, so I didn't know if you meant like board member positions like treasurer, secretary, that kind of thing, or if you meant more along the lines of, so Red Ribbon Week for us is an easier sell to get people involved. And so to say, look, here's a website where you can kind of pick how you want to celebrate Red Ribbon Week, which is, National Drug Prevention Awareness Week. And we've had some luck with that. The library puts up a book display and then promotes it. Now more libraries are doing it. A pastor wears a red ribbon and speaks from the pulpit about what Red Ribbon Week is. Some of the schools, participate in several different ways, and the students will go to city council and talk about Red Ribbon Week. So that is if that's what you're talking about, that's an easy sell for us.
2 questions. Who is it that you're describing their level of involvement? And what is that level of involvement clearly? Just identify one person at a time or one group of people at a time. So you said like
So-
the library.
The library and their level of involvement is that they every Red Ribbon Week they come up with new books to highlight and to display and to promote and take a picture of for their members about addiction and substance use and misuse.
Okay, so their role, if we're clearly defining that role, they're carrying the message into, for the clearly defined evidence-based message of a national campaign. They're carrying that into their environment and passing it along. Okay. So, and you said a pastor wears a red ribbon and preaches from the pulpit and gives a message there about being drug-free. That's another person who is carrying a message. So do you help develop that message, or have you provided them with that information that it's solid, there's no misinformation there, there's no stigma there?
Right now, the pastors that have been willing to do that wear a red ribbon and say what it is, and then give red ribbons away to their community. But I have been trying to get pastors I had given them information or trying to get discussion on how it gets dealt with in their churches. And that is like, it's hard to pin down. Nobody wants to address that, that I have met so far of the Christian pastors that I work with.
Okay. If the message coming from a pastor's wife would help, let me know. I can do that.
I think it depends on what denomination people are. Like, they don't want to and really they don't want to go outside the Bible, like they'll say, yep, your body's a temple. Like they'll and so I'll be like, well, we can expand on that. But even to have a focus group where I called people together and said, hey, you want to talk about how you can talk about this in church? Like, I'm up for discussion, and that's not where we're going with it yet. Wearing a red ribbon and handing out information is where we're at right now.
Awareness, spreading awareness.
Mhm.
Okay. Who else can identify a role? So maybe not board member, treasurer, secretary, right? We've got some of those. We've got the facilitator. In most cases, that would be each of you, right? Is anybody here not a facilitator? I think Leanne joined us. Hello, Leanne.
I'm a coordinator. I'm a coordinator, but the facilitator is actually my, the commissioner, yeah.
So what is your expectation for the facilitator, for yourself or for your commissioner? What are your expectations there, and are they clearly defined for you? And have they been clearly communicated if that's a different individual? All right.
I'm gonna have to say probably not. I mean, I put an agenda together based on what we need to talk about, but you know, we've got some hurdles right now because it's in our bylaws that in order to vote, you have to have so many meetings, you have to have attended so many meetings, and you have to be in person in those meetings. So like we can't get any votes done because like this last one, we had 3 people in person. We have to have a minimum of 6 to have a quorum. So things go on the agenda. We can't do anything because we don't have the people to vote. It's been kind of a nightmare. So things are not really getting done. I mean, that's where I'm sitting right now. So I put an agenda together based on like at the end of a meeting, somebody might say, you know, the next meeting, we want to talk about some, you know, like Brad, which is my commissioner. He said, I really want to start talking about what we're going to do with the money that we've received from our funding source. And I'm like, okay. So I put an email out to everybody, trying to get things to put on the agenda from them. So far, 0.
But the things that you're putting on the agenda that you're not able to vote on, are those educational topics to help raise awareness for those people at the table? Or is it tasks for you or your facilitator to follow up on, or other members?
I have an agenda right here. Hold on.
Want to take a second and say hi to
We're trying to change our operating guidelines. That's one of the things, so that we can change the quorum and can people vote online and that stuff. What we're going to do with the PA2 funding that we have, and then we were going to vote on whether we were going to start providing lunch to try and entice people to come into the meetings. So that's, I mean, the sad thing is we're not doing anything. We're doing nothing, in my opinion.
Well, you're here now. You're working on
Exactly, and that's
recognizing
why I'm
those
here.
things that you can do, right? So having those
Right.
clear expectations, those roles that are clearly defined for a facilitator is pretty critically important. But having the ability to modify your bylaws so that you can actually get things done with fewer people, or fewer people at least meeting in person, that's pretty critical as well. So I see you, Leanne, in the chat box. I will deal with Mike Tobias when I see him tomorrow. Thank you for that. Welcome though. You haven't missed a whole lot, and you can go back and watch the recording. We are recording. So we're talking about having clear expectations, roles and responsibilities for different members, and different levels of involvement for people to engage with your group. Because if somebody comes in really, really passionate about wanting to make a difference, and you say, come to a monthly meeting, they're going to say, wah, wah, and walk. So Penny and Kelly, you both have your hands up. I think Penny's hand was up first. Did you want to share for a minute?
Yes, so our prevention network has operating procedures that have roles clearly defined. We had the issue of people not showing up either. So we had to modify our operating procedures so that we could at least do a e-vote. And we have a membership form that we have people fill out each year so that we know the commitment is there. And we have 2 levels of membership. They can be an active member, and we clearly define what active member means, how many meetings they come to, participation in some of our events, and then the supportive members who maybe can't make that commitment of more involvement. So 2 levels of members. And that several years ago, probably like 5 years ago, we were stuck and needed to redefine who we were, what we're doing. And that's when we did these operating procedures, and that really got us moving forward. So highly recommend doing these operating procedures or bylaws, whatever you want to call those, but that helped us to get unstuck. We also meet virtually, which has helped us tremendously with involvement, at least people attending the meetings. My issue is actually people getting involved in some of the events that are happening. So
yeah, I think that regardless of what those levels of involvement are, it's really good that you have those clearly defined operating guidelines. And I would just take a moment to say that there is a big difference between bylaws and policies. And there's another big difference between policies and procedures. So bylaws are that core structure, the bones of, really, if we're using human anatomy, the bylaws are the bones of what your organization exists for and how it exists. The policies are like the ligaments. They're not going to change, but they'll continue to move and connect everything else. So the policies are how things are done. The bylaws are the structure. This is who we are and why we exist. The policies are how things are done. And that's broad spectrum. That's not day-to-day activities. That's, okay, well, this is our conflict resolution policy. This is our hiring policy. This is our communication policy. This is our financial policy as far as who's responsible for what when there's cash flow, which hopefully is every year, but it comes and goes. So you have to have a policy in place for that. And then those practices is another level of structure that you can have. So you can have, everybody should have bylaws. Everybody should have policies. And then there's a third level where you could have additional practices like an employee handbook of here's a volunteer orientation and things like that. And so Kelly's had her hand up for a while. We were talking about different levels of membership.
Okay, yes. You know, it's a little embarrassing to admit this, but the Sanilac County Prevention Network, we are so fly by the seat of your pants because we don't have an in-depth set of bylaws or procedures. And my former supervisor is the one who actually started the Prevention Network. We had a suicide prevention coalition that just flipped right into the Prevention Network. And then when she left her position, everybody looked at me and said, well, we think you should chair. Okay, I guess I'll chair. And then I reached out to the health department, to the prevention educator, and I said, yeah, I think he should be my vice chair. And they're like, okay. So we don't have any guidelines for, you know, the number of attendees at a meeting, whether we can vote on something. And I also felt a little embarrassed when you started talking about, have you ever sat on a committee or a board where it was kind of driven by one person? That's like, no. Well, yes, I have. Because, I'll say, hey, I'd like to do this. Or, hey, I think this is a good idea. What do you guys think? And they're like, yeah. So then if you show up, then you are a part of what we're doing. If you have time to be a part of it, that's wonderful. If not, we understand. If there are specific initiatives that you are more passionate about being a part of than others, then that's okay. If your attendance kind of fluxes and wanes throughout the year. But when you talk about a future, this kind of fly by the seat of your pants is not sustainable. And of course, we have no funding stream, so that's what we're working on now. But if I had somebody in a position that was aside from like a facilitator, a chair, or vice chair, or secretary, or treasurer, I would want a liaison to the churches, a liaison to the educational system. So a liaison to law enforcement and first responders, having one or two persons on the prevention network who are well connected within our county with these particular organizations that could act as an advocate for us to try and garner more interest and support and to keep these areas appraised of what's happening.
Kelly, you hit on several really good points. And the biggest one is sustainability.
Yeah.
Right? Without that structure in place, God forbid something happens to you, where does that leave your group?
Yeah.
Right? So what we're looking at is creating sustainability through having clear expectations, through having a clear system in place. And there are other groups, there are some people who are really happy to share, and you can copy and paste bylaws and then
Yeah.
cut and put your stuff in there. Run it by your group of people that's not really a board yet and say, would you like to adopt this with me? Yes, we would like to have a membership policy, right? We would like this to be more formalized because we want the work we're doing now to continue.
Yes.
And when you find people like Chris is, like Penny has found, to join you in that strategically moving things forward, you're already set to have success. And Leanne said that you were voluntold. Yes, you were voluntold to do this, but you are more than capable. You have the abilities already to lead this group, and you have been doing it. And you can build the knowledge and the skills, right? And you're already asking the right questions as far as, we don't have bylaws. What do I do about that, right? So give me a call later this week, next week sometime.
Well,
we can work on that.
thank you.
It's a good
Just make-
time now to introduce Joel Huffner, who joined also. And I know he also had another meeting coming in late. Joel, do you want to say hi?
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I was late. I was facilitating my behavioral health council for the Tri-County area, and just happy to be here. Good to see everyone. And sorry I missed the beginning.
You are not alone in that. We're glad you're here too. So, yeah, Kelly, you can do this.
Yes.
You can make it sustainable. It's going to take work, and without a funding stream right now,
Right.
you're in a pinch. Keep reaching out, keep doing the things you're doing to build momentum, build awareness in the community. And I love your ideas of liaisons. So I do want to take a second and talk and identify some of those other roles of people and those different levels of involvement. So I wanted to point this out, that your board chair is not necessarily the same person as your facilitator or your prevention specialist. So your board chair is somebody who should have a firm grasp of what those bylaws are, right? They should be familiar with Robert's Rules of Orders and understand the current policies in place for the group. They should also have a strong understanding of the mission and the vision and the values of your organization. And that's your board chair. And so, again, that's all knowledge, skills, and abilities that can be learned and developed. But it doesn't have to be the same person as your facilitator, as yourself. Another role, and Penny talked about this, I think, is having, let's see, you said you have active members and supportive members. The terms I use are advisory members rather than supportive members, but it's the same thing. They have a special niche, they have special abilities, they have a special connection in the community, and those advisory members or supportive members can be called on when needed for a specific task or role or outreach or event, right? And so they don't have the same expectations to participate in every meeting, but they are also still familiar with the roles and responsibilities and who else is a member in your group. Advisory members are oftentimes people who are not afraid to speak up in public about your mission. So advisory members at the very least should have an elevator speech. They should also know the community resources. So all of your advisory members should have a community resource list where they can connect people they come in contact with the various resources you have for substance misuse, mental health, and awareness. And they should have an elevator speech. So as a facilitator, your job is to prepare those things for your advisory members or work with them one-on-one to develop their own. Because an elevator speech, unless there's a personal connection, isn't going to mean much. You remember at the beginning when I was talking about finding that sensitive spot? And last week I talked about there is no better advocate than a person with lived experience. When you have advisory members who also have lived experience with your issue, whatever it is, ask them sometimes to help develop those elevator speeches or those key talking points for your other members. So this is not something you have to do by yourself. This is not something you should just hand them in a folder of information. The community resources you should already have, but help them develop something as far as key talking points in an elevator speech that they can use to start conversations and to spread awareness in your communities. Does that make sense? Does anybody have that already as far as some key talking points that they provide? You know, Molly, you said you were on a meeting with Mike. Mike does a really good job of providing those talking points, and oftentimes he works with experts in the field to develop those as far as, hey, underage drinking leads to these 3 things. We just had an incident in our community with one of those things. This is how it's affected by current alcohol policy. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So another role is a work group member. So work groups in a coalition are not your regular attendees on a regular basis who are there for every meeting and then you ask them to also come to an additional meeting. Work groups or task forces should be short-term to deal with a specific set of circumstances. Like we have prom coming up. So we have a group of people who wants to put together specific messaging and outreach to the high schools. So that could be a specific short-term work group. Or you could say, well, we have our Huron County Senior Fair coming up. We have 3,000 people coming into one area for that every year. We would like to prepare a presentation for that and then just be a part of the planning process and be involved in hosting that event. And that could be a short-term work group. So work groups should not be made up of your regular board members because then they will get burned out. We don't want anybody to get burned out. So sometimes that's a good way to recruit new people. We were hosting an event for seniors and we started doing this between Christmas and New Year's every year. And so we wanted to target seniors because they needed more fun, engaging, safe and sober events. And so with our substance, was it Huron County Recovery and Prevention Roundtable, instead of having them join our group as a permanent member to be able to have a say, we reached out to them and said, would you like to have a couple people help us plan this event? You know, we understand that you have knowledge and experience about the music and dancing and activities that you all enjoy. We welcome and invite your input. And so that led our work group members who accepted that invitation to then become advisory members, because during the course of planning the event, they learned about substance misuse prevention and alcohol misuse prevention. And they really enjoyed working with some of the younger people and developing those youth connections. So volunteers is the last one I have up here. Not that there aren't more ways for people to get involved, but volunteers. So does anybody have a clear, I'm going to say policy. Does anybody have a clear policy or set of expectations for volunteers? Okay. When I relocated to the Kalamazoo area, I got connected with Griffin Place, and they have been coordinating volunteers through, I think initially they partnered with United Way, and they later connected with the 211 service, so that they have an expansive volunteer network and a really well-established system for onboarding and for engaging volunteers, for tracking hours, and for celebrating their successes. So you don't have to do all of that. What would be some reasonable expectations for you to be able to start a volunteer? What are some of those pieces that you think you should have if a volunteer comes along?
An orientation, an onboarding.
Okay. Leanne, do you ever have volunteers show up and say, all right, you can have me for 2 hours. What do you want me to do?
So we're just getting started, so not so much yet, but I come from a 4-H background. And so I was going to say the first step is an application process, a way to review them, particularly because we're looking to launch a youth coalition. So making sure that we've got good, solid role models serving in those volunteer roles, because they're going to be building relationships with youth.
Yes. Running background checks and all of that good stuff. And then doing a face-to-face interview if you can, to make sure that you are bringing people in who are going to represent who you want to be seen as in the community.
And I think along with it, it goes to as well figuring out which role they're going to best fit in, because they come with a set of desires of what they hope to accomplish. So by having that conversation with them before engaging them, you can make sure that you're meeting their passion as well, and assigning them into a place that's the best fit for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an amazing point that Leah Ann just shared. I'd use that same framework for every one of these other members and potential fit for your coalition or potential members of your group. You're doing all that for a volunteer, and that's amazing. I think that's exactly what you want to do. I used to, at CMU, I was able to manage a volunteer network of 200 students, and it was like jobs. I was basically allowing them to apply for jobs to work with youth in our school districts in the area. And it was an amazing experience, but it was a job, and it was more than just a volunteer opportunity. And if you take that level of accountability with volunteers, I think you want to do the same with your advisory members, your work group members, your board chair. What are they passionate about? Connect them to specific roles, identify an appropriate role for them, help them succeed like you want to do for a volunteer that's just giving up their time, because they're all volunteers. To be honest, they are all volunteers. So I really appreciate that, Leanne. You nailed it. If you can use that kind of, even some of that framework for your work group members and your advisory members, you're golden. I think you're in so much of a better place than just welcome aboard and get to work. Well, let's have an orientation, let's have an application, let's have a dialogue about where they fit and what they can do and what we can do for them.
Absolutely.
And I'll add to that, this is one thing that I appreciate about 4-H and their training is sometimes a volunteer is not a fit. And that it's okay to be able to say to them, you know, we don't really have a great placement for you at this time. That's an okay thing to do as well. So to know that, like, I've been there, I've taken a volunteer because I felt desperate and needed a volunteer. And then it ended up not being a good fit and not a good situation. And they went away disgruntled and mad. And guess what? They told all their friends that they were disgruntled and mad, right? So now it's damaged the reputation of the organization because I wasn't brave enough to say, I don't know that you're such a great fit for this. Let's keep you in mind and see if something else comes up that fits your passion better. So just know that too, for those that are starting out, it's okay. It's okay to sometimes say no or not yet.
I love following up those conversations, whether you've gone out to recruit them or if they've come to you, you have to follow up and say, I really appreciate your feedback. I really appreciate you having this conversation with me. Can I check back in with you in a month or in a year when we're going through this process? Because continuously building up your connections, continuously building your network, and those relationships really is key. So it's okay, like Leanne said, to have those conversations with people and say, I don't have anything for you right now. Can I keep you on my list? And then actually keep a list, right?
And I would
You
say
need to
too,
have a
like if
contact list.
they say no to you, like people in my county have learned they have to say no to me like at least 10 times before I really take that as, oh, you really mean no. Like I've had different people that have said no to me and I listen to like what the reason is for saying no. Like I've had ones that have said, you know, I'm just busy right now. I have this going on and that going on. And I'll just listen and kind of learn and think, okay, well, maybe their kid's involved in a particular sports season. So when that season is done, I just like Ruth said, I'll call them back and be like, hey, I have this specific opportunity. What do you think? Are you ready now? And then sometimes I'll get a yes because I've just followed up with them later on after listening to them. So a no doesn't always mean no forever. Sometimes it's just a no for this season. So.
Well, and oftentimes when people say no and you ask them why, or they provide that why, you're able to connect them with other resources or other supports that can help meet those needs that they have right now. Right? And so really listen when you have those conversations. And I was going to say the same thing, Joel. Have a form, have an application process. It doesn't have to be in-depth or formalized, but you must have those conversations so that you can share expectations, right? That's what we're talking about tonight, is having those set expectations that are clearly communicated to everyone. So upfront conversations of does this work for you? This is what I'm thinking. And if you can do that one-on-one, great. If you end up having to do that with multiple different people at the same time, make sure that you also have someone else there with you who can help answer questions about the purpose, the mission, the vision, and make sure the two of you are on the same page. Kelly.
So with defining these roles and defining the role of a volunteer, would you define the role of a volunteer as someone who just comes on board and partners when there's something specific going on that you need help with, rather than somebody that comes to regular meetings?
Yes. So if someone comes to meetings on a regular basis, depending on what you might have in your bylaws, which we won't bring up again, I promise.
Not with Joel in here, it's embarrassing.
Okay. Depending on how you define membership, regular attendance is one of those key factors for members, right? A volunteer is somebody who you can say, you can call up or send an email and say, hey, I need somebody to go down to, you know, the state office and check out these papers. Can you get updates on these numbers for me? Or maybe somebody else is good at cold calling. And so you say, hey, we're trying to get this information out to teachers. Here's a list of teachers. Can you please give them a call and ask if they'd be interested in this training or engagement opportunity, whatever it is. So yeah, a volunteer is somebody you can call up with a specific task of, hey,
Yeah,
we need
I,
people set up or whatever it is.
yep, I like that because it's, for me, it's activity or event specific for a volunteer. And that's great, where you can consecutively use those groups of volunteers, or that, you know, those few kids or those few young adults or college, whoever it may be, or just a group of volunteers that you have for any event or activity that you guys incorporate or initiate or whatever. And just a quick note on bylaws, you know, I oversee a behavioral health council right now. We don't have formal bylaws. We're not a planning authority yet. We don't have funding coming in yet. I'm forming a coalition, a task force. My office does the same thing, Kelly. Shuts off on me. And so formal bylaws are a part of a movement. So don't think it's you know, it's something bad. It is a part of a progression of a coalition or task force or a board establishing themselves, and it's totally natural.
I'm sharing a document that I created and beefed out for to share on the CADCA community for this group. So it's a coalition orientation. And what we're looking at is really kind of a timing guide and a checklist. So there's a checklist with specific things that it would be good if you had eventually at some point, right? And then there's that checklist for the individual that you're onboarding or orienting to your organization to go through and check, because you don't want to go through and read your bylaws to them or your specific policies. But you do want them to be aware of them. And so you would say, here is a packet of information about our organization. Please review these. Let's meet for an hour next week and go over and address any questions. I would love to hear more from you about your interest and your involvement here. So going through this coalition orientation, we're looking at a welcome and an introduction, right? Having that conversation that Leanne said, as far as how do you see yourself fitting here? Are you aware of our mission and vision? And then at any point in this process, you can stop and pick it up later. And it may be a month, it may be 6 months, it may be a year, but at least you've had that conversation. So right up front, you're going to ask them to engage with you on whatever social media platforms or website you have. Make sure they have your contact information. And very first part of the conversation, help them understand your mission and vision. All right. And then you're doing a lot of that good quality listening of understanding, how do you think you fit in? The second checkbox here is understanding your community resource guide. So most coalitions have a member who is also a part of health department, mental health, something like that, where you already have a community resource guide. So when you're going through that, you might need to make modifications. You might want to contact that organization and ask them to update it with information about your organization or about like specific SUD topics, substance use disorder topics, like Narcan. Where can people get overdose prevention kits? Who is a peer recovery coach in your area? Things like that. So you may, when you're going through the process of making sure you have a community resource guide, you may want to ask them to revise that to include other resources that are not there. If you need help identifying some of those specific resources in your community, contact us at Prevention Network and we'll make those connections, because that's what we're here for. One of the things I added to this form is including some of those ongoing trainings, because they are largely open to the public and at low or no cost to participants. So this is ongoing trainings, not immediate upcoming one-time things, But this is something that you can offer right up front. Let's see, I think Penny was talking about the schools are more interested in what we can do for them than in actually actively participating. So when you have ongoing trainings, when you have this community resource guide that's specific to youth needs, you can provide that to them and it will always be relevant. You do want to update that, review it on an annual basis. That's a good time to also share talking points about what's going on locally as far as social norms or your MiFi data, or if you use other data sources to inform your decision making. Share those talking points right there so that they can start hearing them and thinking, well, yeah, I know so-and-so whose kid was doing that the other day. Or they can make that connection of, yes, this is local, this is relevant, this is happening in my backyard. And that should take about 5 minutes. So third point, identify your organization's approach to prevention. So one of the things that I feel strongly about is not using scare tactics. And so when we're talking about our approach to prevention, we focus on positive, inclusive, and empowering strategies because that's what gets people excited. That's what gets results. So take 2 minutes, say, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it, and this is how we look at things. We want to make a positive change in our community. That's why we're here. Your history of your organization, 5 minutes or less, right? We recognize that there's issues in our community. We want to help deal with those issues. It's particularly good if somebody is a transplant to your community and they don't know what you've done in the past. They've never heard of your organization. Or if you're a brand new organization, take a couple of minutes and say, historically, this is what others have done. It shows that you've done your homework. It shows that you are familiar with the lay of the land, that your organization is capable of building on what others have done in the past or learning from their mistakes. Rather than saying, we're the third attempt at a substance misuse coalition in the last 3 years. You have to acknowledge the failures of the past, whether they're yours or not, so that people know that this is an ongoing issue, that there is depth of, there's roots in the community that have been affected by this issue. An annual report is really helpful if you have it for onboarding new members or volunteers or advisory members. So when we're looking at an annual report, if you have a comprehensive annual report, that's great. If you don't, I would encourage you to put together a one-pager that talks about your financial support and volunteers so that they know that you recognize and honor those who are contributing, in-kind donations, grants, help other people see that there is community buy-in in your organization. If you don't have that yet, just don't include it, and that's fine. All of these are ideally at some point in the future.
And I would say the annual report is like your business card. I have if you want, I can send it an instructions step. So basically just like you have, but a little bit broader on how to complete an annual report, what questions to answer. And it's really helpful for coalitions that do have some stability and some funding behind them, because they can use that as an annual, I mean, that is their report card. That is their business card. You can bring that to county commission meetings. You can share that with your new networks. Hospital associations are going to love that, and want to be a part of what you're doing, because you're an asset to the community, and this is how you've impacted and what you've impacted over the past year. So I can share that with Ruth, and she can share that out.
Highlighting that on my notes. that you're gonna send that to me and we'll share it out. If you could also, Joel, I'm gonna show everybody how to navigate to the CADCA community page.
Yeah.
You can add that as a resource in the library, straight.
Nice.
Next, and I saw a couple people in the chat asking for this. I'll show you where it is online and you can get that yourself, as well as continue to follow up and have these conversations, ask questions. I created it as a Word doc so that you can easily modify it for yourself. So you would just enable editing, and then using your review function, you can edit that out, find and replace. So you would find everywhere it says your organization, use that function to find it, and then replace it with your organization name. Double click at the top, change the header from Prevention Network to whatever you might have for your organization. And the same for the footer, right? This is our mission. Delete that and put your mission in there, right? We're on membership form, right? So we have a pretty simple membership form as far as I identify contact information, their level of interest, and their level of involvement, so that there are clear expectations there. Identify what benefits they have as far as ongoing education and resources, as well as those opportunities to participate in events, those networking opportunities. Set the expectations at that point if you are recruiting a new board member to bring back potential funding sources, because fundraising should be an ongoing activity and not an annual, let's reapply for the same $4,000 we got last year. So set those expectations of, hey, we are building our coalition, we're building capacity, we're building momentum, and so we need you to help bring back potential funding sources. That doesn't mean making cold calls. That means when you become aware of an opportunity for our group, that you bring that back to the table. So funding sources and community outreach opportunities, partnership opportunities, and new coalition members. Every single member should be looking to grow your coalition. And that's why you give them those key talking points. Because when we build momentum, then we're able to change the community. When we get more people involved at different levels, whatever that looks like. Share your organizational chart. This doesn't need to take very long at all. If you have 4 people involved, it won't be very long at all, right? But if you only have 4 people involved, also connect and show that connection to other agencies, to other governmental bodies. Say, we volunteer on a regular basis with this group. We're involved in the planning process for this annual event. So show connections with your community. If you have new board members, you're going to want to do a run through of some of those core policies and bylaws that they want to know about, that they will be responsible for maintaining as a board member. Sorry, I'm talking too much. So there's an easier to read checklist down on the next page. So some people might need a review of Robert's Rules of Orders. Most people are not familiar with prevention ethics if they're coming in from the community, from different agencies and organizations. And again, communicate your expectations for level of involvement. If it's a volunteer, if you're looking for hours per month or availability for special events, communicate that. And in an ideal world, you have a strategic plan and logic model. This is not something that you're going to share with everybody. But if you don't have an annual plan, if you don't have an annual report, you want to take time at some point in this conversation to share opportunities for them to engage, to celebrate and recognize some of the things that you're working on right now, where they might fit in. When you do have a strategic plan and a logic model, let them know that you've put in the work, that you have gone through months-long process, that you've identified those priority areas, you've identified how you're going to approach the issues, and you have specific tasks that are already assigned to specific individuals. Let them know the timeline for that project, because that creates a sense of urgency. So whatever project or opportunity that they might show interest in, communicate a timeline. Coalition information sheet highlights the meetings. Let them know when and how often you're meeting. Let them know who else is involved if they're not all at the table right now. Communicate that attendance requirement. Let them know the difference between a steering or an executive team, the work groups, and different committees. So if you have different levels of involvement, which probably you don't right now. I think Harry and Chris's group does. But if you have different levels of involvement, let them know what those levels are and include a contact list. Because what I get from people when I'm recruiting them to be involved in activities and projects is, oh, Ruth, you're so busy. I won't call you unless it's an emergency. And I think, no, call me before it becomes an emergency. We're in prevention, that's what we do. So make sure people know that they can contact you, but give them that contact list in case they want to talk to somebody else. Because the value of a coalition comes from our broad base, our broad differences in experience and understanding. And then end with a sincere thanks. Whether they've gone through the entire process uninterrupted or not, confirm the next time you're going to speak with them. So if you skip through half of this in your first conversation, still sincere thanks and confirm the next time you're going to follow up. And that's just good business practice. So those things that you would have your new person go through, those important documents that you would say, please read through this on your own, ask me questions. Every time they go through a different policy, make sure that it's appropriate for their level of involvement. And just check through it. And you don't have to read it to them. Hopefully they are capable, involved, willing adults. And then the second page is for them. So they can help you keep on track with your time so that you don't go 15 minutes on your annual report, because there are so many things there that you're proud of. And again, use your judgment on what level of information to give them. So modify this so it fits your needs. And then it gives them a place to put the next time, meeting, date, and location. Hi, Wanda. How are you? I'm going to take a moment and say hi, because I'm trying to keep track of attendance, because some people don't put their contact information in the chat box when I ask them to. I know you will, right, Wanda? Would you please put your email address in the chat? Thank you so much. I'm going to send you a follow-up survey, and that is it. If you want to be involved in future workshops, I would ask you to go through the form on our website. So I'm going to show everybody a couple of things. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to show everybody here our CADCA page. And so one of the amazing things we've been able to do with this program, the community building capacity, we've been able to partner with CADCA. And CADCA is the go-to on community anti-drug coalitions of America. what it stands for. So if I go to community.cadca.org or just cadca.org home, I can jump to communities, scroll down and find the Michigan group. And if you already had a CADCA membership, you are automatically a part of this group. If you are not already a CADCA member, then you can go on to cadca.org and create a login. So typically membership costs $25 to $2,500 depending on your level of involvement. And so individuals who have CADCA memberships do get discounts on trainings. But I wanted to point this out to you because this is where we can continue the conversation tonight, or you can go online and access those documents that we shared earlier with the coalition orientation. It's right here. So I would encourage everybody to go online and find that, and you click on that, and then you'll have a downloaded version that you can edit for yourself. There's also the Tri-Ethnic Center Community Readiness Tool that we shared before, as well as the SAMHSA Prevention Core Competencies Guide. As we're working on developing our prevention workforce, I'd like us to all try to be more on the same page. And so working with SAMHSA, working with CADCA, working with the Michigan MCBAP, the Michigan Council on Alcohol and Drug Prevention, working with those different groups, we can use the tools that have already been created to, excuse me, to really professionalize and to all be on the same page. So I just wanted to show you how to access that as far as community.cadca.org. And then I also want to point out that you can still also communicate with Prevention Network. On an ongoing basis, we can keep those conversations going. So I'm going to do another screen share here. This is preventionnetwork.org. This is our agency. And if I go to programs, Coalition Community Change Projects, that's this program. And I scroll down, there's 4 parts. Because all of us are here because we're trying to make a change in our communities. We can do that much more effectively when we have good connections. The purpose of the CADCA community is for us to be able to connect, because I don't have all the answers, you don't have all the answers, but we can share our information, resources, and questions on that page. So if you're not aware already, we are offering mini grants or capacity building up to $50,000. So at this point, we still have a significant amount of funding available for those projects. You can find the application right here on preventionnetwork.org. The second part of what we're doing is Prevention Navigators. So I've had a couple of conversations so far with experts in our field. My executive director, Louise Montag, and Joel Huffner, who has been doing this work specifically capacity building and creating structure and sustainability for coalitions for a few minutes. He's been doing this work. So you just click on the link here and it'll take you to where you can listen to those podcasts, or you can search wherever you listen to podcasts, you can search for Prevention Navigators. The third part is the capacity building workshops. So if you're finding this helpful, we're going to try to get together on a weekly basis, except on the first Wednesday of each month. You can click join us and register for whatever you're able to attend. The recordings are here for past sessions. And the fourth bit is the CADCA community. And there is a guide of, if you've never heard of CADCA before, you're not a member. There's a frequently asked questions kind of how-to guide along with the phone number for Amy, who's our partner at CADCA, who can walk you through the process. Or if you're already a CADCA member, you can just click there and go straight to the CADCA page. So the last thing on our page is our calendar. We had our board meeting today, so we were able to vote on those awards for the first round of funding for our grants. And then tomorrow I'm going to send out those notifications as well as the survey for this workshop. And then you'll see other things on the calendar as well. So that's where we stand. Those are the resources we have right now. I think that I've really appreciated some of the conversations, and because we are such a diverse group with different community needs, I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Joel for some technical assistance on how do we get our hospitals more involved. Oftentimes hospitals have meeting rooms that they're willing to let you meet in. Whether they're willing to have a staff member involved in it at any level or not, I don't know. One of the things that I've found that hospitals are really responsive to is in things that affect their bottom line and in opportunities for their staff to not be so overwhelmed. So the MODA grant, the Michigan Overdose Data to Action Plan, is involved heavily with hospital data. And so you can go on preventionnetwork.org, or you can do a search for MODA and find information about that ongoing program, where you can find the data that shows your hospital locally is being impacted by these issues that we are trying to address. Let us work with you on that. As far as churches being involved, try to identify things that they're already doing and join them where they're working, because having a spiritual understanding of the value of life is a protective factor. So when you join what they're doing, you're raising them up, you're sharing the value and sharing part of your mission with them. Let them see you joining them. We cannot expect everybody to come to a monthly meeting. When you're talking about law enforcement, we already suggested reaching out and offering Narcan if for those communities who are saying, my law enforcement says we don't deal with that. There's different grants coming to help establish rapid response teams. And if your law enforcement officers are not willing to get involved, try your probation and parole officers and see what you can do there. If you want to help starting that conversation, let me know. Reach out to myself or Joel and we can help you prepare for that conversation a little bit better. We're going to wrap it up here in just a minute. As far as schools, I really didn't say much about youth involvement. Next month, we're going to focus exclusively on youth involvement with the podcast, with the workshops, with any additional trainings that we offer. So I'm going to leave that as a teaser, say there's more to come, but I'm going to check the chat box now and see if there's any other questions. Look at all the information everybody gave me about how to contact them. That's wonderful. Jen and Chris, do you need me to drop that document in the chat box, or is it okay that I showed you where to access it yourself? I think it's really valuable for people to learn how to get things themselves. Okay, so we are building capacity right there. I'm not spoon feeding anybody anything. Kelly, you've got your hand up again. But you're muted this time.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask about the strategic prevention framework. And for some reason, I thought that you said that there was a specific training on the CADCA website for that took some time to go through. And I haven't been able to find it. I mean, I actually found the SAMHSA documents more easily, but I thought that there was like a video training.
Okay. Let me share that screen. Because
Okay.
I reopened that window. So if we're
I
on
found-
cadca.org training.
Yeah.
Online courses.
That's where I'm at right there.
Okay.
Is the primer video downloads that you were talking about?
Access courses. Transforming your community is the course I'm talking about.
Whoops.
So did you, from this page,
Yeah.
click access courses.
Oh, that's a click. Okay. I missed that.
And then transforming your community, you're going to add that to your cart.
Perfect.
And it's free for members and non-members.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay, we have like 20 seconds left. Wanda, I'm sorry I didn't get to hear more from you about what you're dealing with in your community. Molly, feel free to give me a call. I think I'm talking to your group on Monday. Is there anything else that you all have questions about at this point? Okay. In that case, it is 5:30. Thank you so much for engaging in the conversation tonight. It was a pleasure to spend some time with each of you today. I think you have my phone numbers. You've got my contact information. If you need to reach out for some technical assistance on any of this, don't hesitate. We're only going to grow stronger the more we connect, right? Okay. And I don't have all the answers, so I'll be calling Joel too. So. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Look for the feedback survey in your email tomorrow. It'll take about 1 minute.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.